What if I told you that McLaren may have discovered the reason why Oscar Piastri, the drivers' championship leader, has started to crumble just when they needed him most? What did the engineers really find after fully opening the Australian's car after the Mexican GP practice? What seemed like a normal descent could hide a much more delicate truth. Today I tell you everything that McLaren discovered after a secret investigation and the technical and strategic consequences that could define the rest of the season. It all started in Austin, but the true origin of Oscar Piastri's collapse dates back to a silent buildup of pressure that had been brewing for the previous weeks. Up to that point in the season, the Australian driver had led the championship solidly. With a 34-point lead over his teammate, Lando Norris, and an image of consistency and maturity that many did not expect from someone in his second full year in Formula One, it seemed that Piastri was destined for more than just promise. He was knocking on the door of the world title. But then, everything changed. Austin was the beginning of the decline. All that weekend, something felt different. From the first practices, Piastri's MCL 39 did not seem to have the same life as Norris's. It was not a scandalous difference, but it was constant. 0.3 of a second slower per lap. Always behind. Always looking for answers. And although in F1 this can be explained by an infinite number of variables, tire temperature, chassis configuration, confidence in braking, the difference did not disappear either in qualifying or in the race. In Sunday's main race, Norris took second place, putting him back in the fight for the championship. Piastri, on the other hand, finished fifth. And not only that, its rhythm was disconcerting. In theoretically favorable conditions for McLaren, its performance was inexplicably poor. Andrea Stella, team director, was quick to confirm what was already suspected. A complete technical investigation would be carried out on Piastri's car. It was a public statement that, in the internal world of Formula One, is as rare as it is powerful. For a team to reveal that it is going to investigate the chassis of one of its leading drivers is not routine. It is a warning message. And also a sign of protection towards the driver, as if McLaren were trying to rule out any blame on Piastri's part before the judgment of the press and fans became irreversible. But the reality is that this investigation had a more complex context. Since the Azerbaijan GP, where Piastri suffered accidents in qualifying and the race, his performance had been erratic. In Singapore, he was pushed out by Norris on the first lap. And in Austin, that lack of rhythm was not only confirmed, it was worsened. The lead he had built in the first half of the season was disintegrating. Verstappen, who seemed out of combat in the summer, had won 3 of the last 4 races and had cut 64 points. It was like watching a structure that seemed firm begin to crack from within. Inside McLaren, this sequence of events set off all the alarms. And it wasn't just a matter of numbers. There was a silent worry, almost imperceptible but real, that something deeper was going on. Was Piastri's car different from Norris's? Was there a structural difference that was not being detected in the previous analyses? Or was it perhaps emotional exhaustion, a lack of adaptation in high-pressure situations? Nobody knew. And that was, perhaps, the most worrying thing. Therefore, the technical investigation was not just a routine check. It was a surgical intervention to McLaren's competitive heart. In a season where the margin for error is minimal, any anomaly, no matter how small, can decide a championship. And if Oscar Piastri, the revelation driver of the previous year, began to lose confidence, the fracture could be irreversible. This moment marked the turning point. It wasn't just about what happened on the track. The truly serious thing was what was beginning to break in the narrative. Because when the youngest and most promising driver on your team begins to doubt, to lose performance silently, without visible dents or obvious failures, a situation is created that is as dangerous as it is difficult to resolve. One in which the problem, even if it is not seen, can be everywhere. In Formula One, when a team publicly announces that it is going to thoroughly inspect the car of one of its drivers, the message is twofold. On the one hand, it tries to protect the driver in the event of a possible performance crisis. On the other hand, it seeks to maintain the team's technical credibility in the face of its rivals and the fans. And that was precisely what McLaren executed after Austin. A complete technical review of Oscar Piastri's MCL 39, initiated at the Woking factory and fueled by the growing skepticism that invaded the paddock. At the official press conference on Thursday, just before the Mexican GP, Piastri addressed the rumors with a calm that seemed studied. There was nothing drastically wrong, he said. But his tone, and especially his choice of words, left room for doubt. Some things weren't as good as they could have been, he acknowledged, adding that the development of the weekend in Austin had been different than expected from several angles. What he did not say, and what he will probably never say in public, was that the performance deficit was not the product of a single cause, but of a chain of errors and uncertainties that fed on each other. The first technical key that was leaked came from Ted Kravitz, Sky Sports analyst and one of the best connected within the paddock. According to their sources, McLaren was forced to run with a taller setup in terms of chassis height during the main Grand Prix in Austin. This, to the common eye, might seem irrelevant. But in the current ground effect-dominated era of F1, raising the chassis just a few millimeters is equivalent to disabling the car's largest downforce generator. The cause of that conservative configuration was even more revealing. In Saturday's sprint, Piastri and Norris collided on the first lap. McLaren did not obtain data on the car's long-term behavior or degradation, plank wear, or aerodynamic stability in real racing conditions. Without this information, the team found themselves in the dark. That sacrifice, although preventive, was devastating for Piastri's rhythm. In theory, both McLarens were configured similarly, but each driver's individual adaptations to that new altitude were different. Norris managed to adapt his aggressive style to the new balance of the car. Piastri, on the other hand, found himself with a car that responded unpredictably in fast corners and did not allow him to push when braking, where he usually made a difference. That disconnection translated into poor times and a feeling of helplessness that followed him throughout the weekend. But the story doesn't end here. Because within McLaren's internal report, there is another dimension, the management of the tire operating window. Without the sprint data, and with a high chassis height, the thermal behavior of the tire changed. The car became more unstable under braking, more oversteering when exiting slow corners, and less effective in maintaining tire temperature. These small imbalances generate a chain reaction. The driver loses confidence, enters the curve earlier, lifts more at the apex, and exits with less traction. And time inevitably evaporates. This is where McLaren's investigation becomes something deeper than a simple technical check. What they were really looking for was not just a mechanical anomaly, but to understand whether the car and the driver had stopped speaking the same language. If the technical-emotional bond that defines a successful pairing in Formula One was being broken in silence. Most worryingly, no clear structural defect was found. There was no broken wing, no damaged suspension, no miscalibrated sensor. What there were patterns of behavior that didn't add up. Discrepancies between telemetry and the pilot's sensations. And that, for a team that aspires to win both championships, is a disturbing sign. McLaren didn't say it outright, but the message was clear. The problem was not in the hardware, but in synergy. And correcting that cannot be achieved with a new part. It requires something much more complex. Adjusting the car to a driving style that is still maturing, while maintaining the pace of development against rivals such as Red Bull, Mercedes, and Ferrari. A task as technical as it is psychological, as urgent as it is delicate. McLaren's technical diagnosis following the investigation in Austin revealed that Piastri's car had no obvious fault. But the most important thing was not what they found, but what they did not find. The problem was not in the sensors, nor in the suspension, nor in the floor of the car. What McLaren began to suspect and then accept was more uncomfortable. The limit of performance was not in the car, but in the driver. Andrea Stella, a team manager with a reputation for being diplomatic, broke that mold by speaking unusually bluntly about Piastri. He said Oscar had room for improvement in low-grip situations, especially when aggressive, reactive driving was required. These types of conditions are not only common in Formula One, but are the norm when the height of the chassis is raised, ground effect is lost, and the car becomes nervous, unstable, unpredictable. Under these circumstances, high-level driving is neither smooth nor precise. It's wild. It's about fighting every corner, accepting that the car is going to move, that it is going to oversteer in the middle of the entry, that the brakes are going to lock, and that the wheels are going to spin on the exit. These are moments in which the driver is required to react with instinct, with reflexes, with a visceral reading of the car. It's a style that favors drivers like Lando Norris, who have developed an extreme sensitivity for driving on unpredictable surfaces. For Piastri, however, this territory remains new. What do you think of all this? Do you think McLaren should have shared more details about what it found in Piastri's car? Or was it better to protect it from media exposure? Are they being fair to him, or is it time to demand him like a champion? Do you think his driving style can evolve enough in time to prevent Verstappen or even Norris from stealing his dream? Leave me in the comments what you think about all this.